So we are officially recording, and I'm so excited to be talking to you and having you share your knowledge and insight with my clients, my audience in the Facebook group, and everyone on my email list. This is going to be super helpful. I know you're like a professional when it comes to workplace legal policies. Like you're the go-to expert. I see you in like the admin bar Facebook group and all of the communities that I'm in. So super excited to introduce you to my audience. So most of my clients and audience are virtual bookkeepers, accountants, and tax professionals, and they're either in the very beginning stages of planning out their website project, or they might have a website that they built themselves, and their website policies is probably something that they overlooked. So with you being a legal expert in this area, I'm super excited for you to be able to introduce yourself much better than I'm sure I can, and the information that you have. So I'll let you go ahead and take things from here.
Thanks for having me, for watching this. Fun fact, I have half of an LLM in tax law. So while in law school is an area that I was really interested in, and then I just wanted to be done with school and never finished it up, but maybe someday. That would be a fun thing to do. So we'll talk about how to avoid fines and lawsuits with website policies. And this is a pretty short presentation just to kind of give a very basic overview of what the stuff is. And then we'll go into like Q&A if anybody has questions. And before we get started on this, I do want to note that anything that I talk about today or anything that I answer during the Q&A is not legal advice. If you are looking for legal advice, I would recommend speaking to a lawyer in your area. So a little bit about me. My name is Donata, and I'm the president and legal engineer of Termageddon. Termageddon is a website policy solution that has generated and kept up to date tens of thousands of policies. I'm a licensed attorney, licensed in Illinois, and a certified information privacy professional. And outside of work at the American Bar Association, I chair the ABA's e-privacy committee. I'm the member of the Science and Technology Council and the Cybersecurity Legal Task Force. And I'm also the ABA's representative to the United Nations as well. So today we'll give a quick overview of what website policies are, why your website needs to have these policies, who needs to have them, and then also a little bit about where to obtain policies. So starting off with the privacy policy, talking to a lot of business owners every day, people always tell me, well, my website does not collect personal information, so I don't need this. And that's actually a very common misconception. So what we call personally identifiable information, or PII, also known as personal data or personal information, is any information that could identify somebody or any information relating to an identified person. So for example, like names, emails, phone numbers, physical addresses, IP addresses, all of those things are considered PII. Now, these things are collected through most modern websites. So most websites will have a contact form or an email newsletter sign-up form. They'll have an account sign-up form. Maybe you have analytics features like Google Analytics, or you have advertising features like the Metapixel. All of those features collect PII. And any website that collects PII needs to have a privacy policy because privacy laws require that. Now, what is a privacy policy? So a privacy policy is a document on your website that explains your privacy practices, like what PII you're collecting, what you do with that PII, who you share it with, and any other disclosures required by the privacy laws that apply to you. So privacy laws specifically list the disclosures that your privacy policy needs to have. So you need to have those disclosures based on the laws that actually apply to you and your business. Now, some people may say, well, people are submitting that information voluntarily. Well, that's great that they're submitting it voluntarily, but that does not change this requirement. Now, privacy laws, they're meant to protect consumers and not businesses. So privacy laws don't really care where your business is located. In addition, while some laws may not apply to nonprofits or some laws may not apply to small businesses, there are laws that apply regardless of your business size. So because of this consumer protection element, to figure out which laws apply to you, you want to ask, where do you do business? Where do you offer goods or services? Like, where are your customers located? Who could be submitting their PII to your website? And who do you track online through tools like Google Analytics? So who could be visiting your website and submitting a form? Who could be visiting your website and being tracked, as well as where your clients are and where they're located. Terms of service is the second policy that I wanted to touch on. It's also called terms and conditions, TNCs, and basically this is the rules of using your website. So it's a bunch of clauses that depend on what features you have on your site. So for example, let's say you have e-commerce. So if you have e-commerce, your terms of service would talk about cancellations, refunds, payments, shipping, and subscriptions. If you allow people to make comments on your website, it would discuss that. It also helps you comply with consumer protection laws like automated renewal laws. So for example, like California has an automated renewal law that says that if your website does not inform people of certain terms of those automated renewals, so like how frequently will they be charged and how to cancel, anything that they get through that subscription is a gift. So that means you'd have to refund the customer and they would enjoy the benefits of your services or any products that you give them if you did not provide those disclosures. It can also protect your intellectual property by saying that everything on your site is owned by you, that you can't crawl the site, you can't copy any of the material on the site. It can also meet the requirements of any associations. So if you're part of an association that has a code of conduct or code of ethics that you have to follow, they may require you to link to that within your terms or somewhere within your website. And it can also reduce your liability and the amount of damages that you may be responsible for because of certain features of your site. So again, comments or uploading content or links to third-party sites. This one is actually really common. So maybe you have a link to your Facebook page or your LinkedIn page on your site. Your terms of service can say, well, if you click on this link and your computer gets hacked, that's not our fault. So the terms of service details the rules of using your website, and it also helps you limit your liability and limit your damages too. The cookie policy and consent tool. So many websites use cookies or scripts to track people. This is not just Google Analytics or Metapixel. This can also be reCAPTCHA or YouTube videos. And certain laws may require you to have a cookie policy and a cookie consent tool. So the cookie policy tells people what cookies are being used on your website and provides information about those cookies. So for example, are they essential cookies? Are they functional? Are they marketing? Who's the provider of that cookie? So for example, like Google provides this cookie. Is it a first party or third party cookie? What's the purpose of that cookie? How long that cookie will stay on somebody's device? And then also how somebody can opt out of cookies. And a cookie consent tool is used to consent to or decline cookies. So you can opt in or out of the placement of certain cookies on their device. This configuration, again, depends on which laws apply to you. But for example, some people who may visit your website may have the right to not be tracked by Google Analytics or Metapixel until they specifically say, yes, I do want to be tracked. And when they click the accept button, that's when you can start tracking them. And also in other areas, people have the right to opt out. So if they were tracked by Google Analytics, for example, they can say, I don't want to be tracked by them anymore. And they can make that selection. And that's done on the cookie consent banner. A disclaimer. So a disclaimer, the way that I like to think about it is those exercise tapes in the 90s that you would play. And then it would say, if you feel like you're going to die, stop exercising. That's what a disclaimer is. So it helps you limit your liability because of certain features of your website. So if you have any of these, then you would want to have a disclaimer. So for example, you're advertising third-party products or services. You're displaying testimonials, reviews, or endorsements on your site. You're providing any information that could be seen as financial or investment advice. Maybe you're displaying copyrighted work without the copyright owner's permission. So for example, like you comment on somebody else's video. You're displaying or selling health products. You provide affiliate links like Amazon affiliate links. You provide health or fitness advice, probably not relevant to this group, but it is a great example. And also providing information that could be seen as legal advice. So I know a lot of CPAs may provide information on things like, here's why you should form an LLC or an S Corp, which could be seen as legal advice by some people. So you'd want to have a disclaimer that says, hey, this is not legal advice. You need to talk to a lawyer, just like what I said at the beginning of this presentation. Now, why do policies matter? So first, fines. For example, for the privacy policy, privacy law non-compliance fines start at $2,500 per website visitor. So let's say you had 100 website visitors from California who submitted their personal information and you didn't provide them with the right information in your privacy policy. That fine would be calculated as 2,500 times 100, which basically shows you how quickly this can balloon into really high fines. And a lot of times in the news, you'll see like large businesses like Google, Facebook, X being fined, but many small businesses have been fined as well. If you check enforcementtracker.com, you'll see a lot of these fines are issued to small businesses, people who are just a one-person business, or even people who are not part of a business at all. So these do happen, they just don't make the headlines. Lawsuits. We've seen a lot of lawsuits being filed under the California Invasion of Privacy Act for tracking website visitors through IP intelligence tools, analytics, or advertising without their consent. So businesses are increasingly getting sued for this stuff too. This one, privacy can be a competitive advantage. If you've been in business for a long time, this really wasn't the case like 10 years ago. People weren't really looking for this stuff. Consumers weren't making decisions based on privacy really, but that is quickly changing. So there's a couple of really interesting studies out there, like 93% of Americans would switch to a company that prioritizes privacy, or 7 in 10 Canadians would refuse to provide their personal information to a company over privacy concerns. So this is things like, people won't submit a contact form, or they won't do business, or they won't sign up for an email newsletter, things like that. And then lastly, answering common questions. Policies can help answer commonly asked questions and move customers along on the purchasing path. So for example, with a terms of service, let's say that you offer a subscription service and customers want to know, hey, can I cancel this, right? Am I just signed up for this service forever? Well, consumers will go to terms of service and say, okay, what's their cancellation policy? If they don't see that, they might just move on to another business instead of contacting you and asking. Same thing for selling products. Like, can I get a refund on this if I don't like it? Consumers want to know that information. And if they don't get that information, they might just move on to a different business, versus if that information is presented to them, they might move forward and make a purchase. Now, there are some policy rules. So, a lot of people assume that the policies are just random information that's out there. Some lawyer put it together based on their whims and fancies. Unfortunately for me, it's not like that. There are actual rules that apply to this. So first of all, the policies must be based on the laws that apply to you. So for example, the privacy laws dictate specifically what disclosures your privacy policy needs to contain. And if you miss any of those disclosures, you're out of compliance. And those disclosures must be included in your policies. They must also be updated for changes in laws, rules, and regulations. So there are multiple privacy laws that have gone into effect this year, that go into effect next year. There's always new regulations being issued, new enforcement actions that interpret the rules of those laws. So those policies must be updated for changes. And then lastly, they must accurately describe your business, meaning that it cannot just assume information or make information up. So let's say that your policy says that you do not share personal information, but in reality you do. So most businesses do share personal information. If you have an email newsletter list that you upload into MailChimp, you're sharing information. If you are using WordPress and the CMS stores a copy of that form in the backend, just in case you lose it somewhere else, that is sharing information with the CMS. If you get an email every time somebody submits a contact inquiry, you're sharing information with the email service provider. So there's really nothing wrong with sharing personal information. It's extremely common, but it must be accurately stated in your policy. Well, a lot of times with templates and things like that, those make stuff up for you. So they don't usually accurately describe your practices. So keep this in mind as we go through this next section, where to obtain policies. So there are a couple options for where you can obtain policies. So the first option is a privacy attorney, which if you can afford it is by far the best option available. So a privacy attorney can draft your policies and keep them up to date for you. They can provide you with legal advice, but it can be cost prohibitive to small businesses. So that's something to keep in mind. Option 2 is templates. So if you go online and search free privacy policy template or even privacy policy template, you will see that there are thousands of options available. There are some very core issues to templates. So first of all, they're not based on the privacy laws that apply to you. So they don't figure out which laws apply to you, and therefore they don't know what disclosures need to be included in your policies. Also, don't be fooled by the GDPR privacy policy template. Most of them are not even compliant with GDPR, but even if they were, there are requirements from other privacy laws that are not included in GDPR. So even if you comply with GDPR, you're not compliant with other laws. They're not based on your actual business practices because they're templates, right? They make stuff up. They put very general information there, or they decide things for you. So it's not based on your business practices. They don't automatically update, and they also cannot provide legal advice. Option 3 is AI. So, businesses now use ChatGPT or Claude for all sorts of things, right? So you might be saying, well, I can just ask ChatGPT to write me a privacy policy. So I tried that just for fun. So the only way that the AI can provide a compliant policy is if you tell it which laws apply to you, what disclosures each law requires, and list your practices related to each disclosure. So unless you're a privacy lawyer, that's going to take you a really long time to figure that stuff out and write it up. But if you provide it with that stuff, it can provide you with something relatively good. But again, you have to know all of this information. It also does not automatically update your policies, and it does not include the latest laws. So AI is usually at least a couple years to a few months behind, and this stuff changes this pretty frequently. And it also cannot provide you with legal advice. Lastly, option 4 is a policy generator. This can be a good middle ground for businesses. It also cannot provide legal advice because it's a policy generator. So it's a software tool. But a policy generator can help determine which laws apply to you and then asks you the appropriate questions to generate those disclosures. And then it can automatically update your policies when legislative changes occur. So to pick the right policy generator, you should do some due diligence and research. So ask, is their attorney experienced in privacy on staff? Do they have a proper privacy law identifier that asks you the right questions to determine which laws apply to you? So this isn't just, do you need to comply with GDPR? That's not a privacy law identifier, because most business owners don't know whether or not they need to comply with GDPR. We need to know the factors that make somebody be required to comply. Which laws does the generator cover? Do they ask you follow-up questions to create the disclosures required by those laws? Do they make any assumptions about your business practices? And then do they update policies prior to legislative changes going into effect? So a lot of generators will say that they do update your policies, but actually they update them like 3 years after a law went into effect, which is pretty much useless. So you need to update prior to those changes going into effect. A little bit about Termageddon. So we're an auto-updating website policies generator, and we can create the policies that we discussed earlier and help keep them up to date with legislative changes. The pricing is $119 per year or $12 per month, depending on the billing cycle you choose. For the policies and the cookie consent banner. And since we're with ChatSony here, we do have a link and a promo code ChatSony, which would give you 10% off your first payment if you do choose to go with us. So I'll keep this up for a minute, but we can get into questions if anybody has any.
So Donata, thank you so much. This was super helpful, and I'm very surprised you were able to condense it down into this quick presentation. So thank you so much. Of course, I want to give everyone time to pop their questions in the comments, or if you want to unmute yourself, you're definitely free to do that. But in the meantime, I've been taking some notes, and I actually have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. So first thing, you mentioned GDPR a few times during the presentation. For those who are not aware of what that is, would you mind explaining exactly what that stands for and who it applies to?
Yeah, so GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a privacy law from the EU that protects residents of the European Union. And essentially what it's meant to do is basically homogenize the laws between all the EU countries so that it's easier to do business in the EU. Because there's one set of rules, which is not something that we have here in the US, unfortunately. But anyway, so GDPR can apply to anybody that has an establishment in the European Union, meaning that you have a business in the EU, or you offer goods or services to EU residents. So let's say you advertise in the EU, you offer your website in German, you have your pricing in euros, things like that. Regardless of whether or not your business is located in the EU. So let's say you're a US business offering goods or services in the EU, it would apply. And then lastly, if you're outside of the EU and you monitor the behavior residents of the EU through your website. So let's say you have Google Analytics, somebody from the EU could visit your website and be tracked through Google Analytics. The law would apply to you as well, even if you're not located in the EU. And yes, businesses outside of the EU have been fined for non-compliance with GDPR.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. We have one question in the chat. Jeff is asking, how does the auto update work?
Yeah, so for the auto update, so I can just speak on behalf of Termageddon. I'm not sure exactly how other companies do it, but if you were to use it, Termageddon, you would answer the questions to generate your policies, and then you would get an embed. So the embed code is what you put on your website's privacy policy page, for example, and that's what displays the policy text. Now, let's say there's a brand new privacy law out of, I don't know, trying to think of a state that doesn't have one right now. Let's say, well, Delaware has 2 laws, but let's use Delaware as an example. So let's say there's a new privacy law out of Delaware. What we do is we send you an email letting you know, hey, there's a new privacy law. We may need you to answer some new questions to determine if that new law applies or to create disclosures required for that new law. Once you answer those questions, let's say you were to, select yes or no or whatever, you click submit, and then we automatically update your policy text through that embed code. So your new policy text will include those disclosures required by that new law, for example, if that new law applies to you.
Okay, so you guys make it super, super simple. Wonderful. Another question I had, just to kind of get the ball rolling here, what should people expect during the onboarding process? So once they sign up, what should they expect? What do they need to have prepared and know beforehand about their website, whether it's a new site that they're having me or someone else build, or if it's something that they built themselves?
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I do want to note that we offer complimentary onboarding. So you can reach out to us and we'd be happy to book a call to help set up your policies. So that's available. But basically you go through the process. So you're asked questions about your website, like what's the website URL? You're asked questions about your business, like what's your legal business name? Where was it formed? Who people should contact if they have any questions. And then you're asked about certain things about your business, like where do you do business? Whose personal information are you collecting? What personal information are you collecting? So like you can select, I collect names and emails, I collect phone numbers. You can select, what do you do with that information? So for example, like I use it to answer customer questions, or I use it to send email marketing. Things like that. So it's relatively simple. I think the most important part is knowing like your business legal name and where it was formed. I know that sounds really stupid, but sometimes people don't have that information on hand, especially if you've been in business for a while. But it's basically just information about your business and your practices and your website. And again, if you ever have any questions or you need any help, you can book a call with us. can help you take you through that entire process. We also have what we call Termageddon. So on the right side of the screen, you will see a video and a text explanation of each question, of each answer option. That basically provides you with tips on how to answer that question. So if you're ever not sure about a particular question, you can watch the video or read the text.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Jeff, you asked, so how would my website get updated? Do you need access to make the updates? We do not have any access to your website. So once you generate policies, you get embed codes. The codes are what you put on your policy pages. So the privacy policy code will go on the privacy policy page on your website. And we have access to that code, and we just push updates to the text through that code. So we don't have like login access to your website or anything like that. It just happens through that code.
And that was a great question, Jeff. Let's see. One of my questions, I know we mentioned contact forms, email sign-up forms for newsletters. A lot of my clients and a lot of bookkeepers, since they're working virtually, they use appointment scheduling tools like Calendly or TidyCal or something like that. So how would that work as far as the privacy policy? Is that something they would just add on there, or are they do they not need a privacy policy since they're not collecting it directly through the site and it's through the third party?
Yeah, so most of the time, if you look at the terms of service or the data processing agreements of Calendly, for example, they will say that they process the data on your behalf, but that you're the one that's actually responsible for the data being collected. So most of these types of vendors do require you to disclose that information that's being collected on your privacy policy. So let's say that your calendar booking form has a name and an email and a phone number. You would want your own privacy policy to disclose that. A lot of those tools also place cookies on users' devices when they go to your website. So that's usually something that you'd want to acknowledge in the cookie policy and the cookie consent banner as well, and potentially have to obtain consent for those features to load too.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I know that's a common question I get if they're trying to avoid a policy at all, if they use something like that. But okay, that's great information. I guess one of my final questions would be related to analytics. I know you mentioned Google Analytics would require you to have a policy. What are some other alternatives that you recommend? I know I've been using Fathom Analytics, and I'm not sure if there are any other popular alternatives that you're aware of.
Yeah, so Google Analytics is extremely problematic because it collects a lot of data. And it also sends that data to the United States, which, for example, the EU government does not love because of our surveillance laws and all that other stuff. So I guess the first question is, before you install any analytics tool at all, ask yourself, do you actually need it? You know, we meet with a lot of business owners who, oh yeah, I have Google Analytics, but I never checked this analytics data. I've never seen it. I've never logged into it. You know, I just set it up years ago and I thought I would look at it, but I don't. You know, think about whether or not you're actually going to need this and what you're going to do with this data. Like, are you going to do anything about the results that you get? You know, if you want to have Google Analytics, fine. Just know that there are privacy-friendly alternatives out there, like Chatsuni said. So there's Fathom Analytics, Matomo Analytics is also very popular, and those collect a lot less data. Some of them may not collect any data on the user, so you may be able to even avoid the cookie consent banner if that's the only tracking that you're doing. And it's definitely a much safer alternative. I know that any website with, you know, those tracking tools from Google or Meta definitely assume a lot of risk having those on there.
Oh, great. So I'm on the right path using Fathom Analytics.
Yeah, I love Fathom. They're really great, and they're out of Canada, which is really nice because Canada has been deemed to offer the same level of privacy protections as the EU. So it's very good.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. I don't think of any more questions that I hear often. I guess another one would be, I know you mentioned the pricing for Termageddon, which definitely seems super reasonable compared to, I know like attorneys can be expensive, But on average, like how much would it be if someone decided to go the route of having an attorney draft the policies manually, like from scratch, like that?
It's really hard to say because attorneys charge differently based on where they're located, and what their experience level is. So, for example, I'm like in the boonies of Chicago land. So if I were to go to an attorney in my area, I would pay a lot less than if I were to go to an attorney in downtown Chicago. Also, if I were to find an attorney that has 5 years of experience, I would pay a lot less than somebody who has 20, right? So it depends on your location, it depends on their experience level. You definitely want somebody who's experienced in privacy specifically. So you do not want to ask like an estate planning attorney to write this because they would not know what to write or what to do. So take this with a grain of salt that it all depends on where you're located and the experience level. But I would say like probably starting at 5,000, it can go up to 50,000 depending on the complexity of your business or your website. And that would be for the initial draft. And then most attorneys will charge extra for the updates and the tracking and things like that too, which can also add up. But if you're curious, you can always go out there and get a quote and just ask. There's no harm in going to a local privacy attorney or a business attorney and saying, hey, like, how much would you charge for this? And if you do go to an attorney, make sure you ask them questions like, are you going to charge me extra for updates? And if they're confused about what the updates are, they're probably not a good attorney for you. And ask them, is this going to be based on the privacy laws that apply to me? Are you going to help me figure out which laws apply to me? Because they should know the answer to that, and the answer to that should be yes. So that's another good way to kind of weed out people too.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And it's great to be able to have some type of like ballpark range or estimate, I guess, just to kind of see the cost savings there. I didn't know it was that much starting at the cost.
People have been quoted like 50,000 for it, so it all depends for sure.
Okay, great, thank you. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I guess my final, and I'll say this like a few days. As far as a hopefully final question for now, when people use this link that I shared in the chat to sign up, will that automatically give them information on how to schedule that onboarding call, or would an email introduction be best?
So an email introduction is great. I can also paste a link in the chat where you can book a call with us too. So just using that does not automatically give you like access to the onboarding link, but I just put it in the chat. When you sign up, you'll also see help at the top. You can click that. And that will allow you to submit a ticket, and then we'll just reply with that link too for you to schedule a call as well.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So before I let you go, I want to make sure if anyone else has any questions to pop them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. We want to make sure that we cover everything important to you guys.
I can also put my email in the chat too. So if anybody has any other questions that they think of later, definitely feel free to email me as well. I'm one of those people where I watch like a webinar or a presentation, and then 6 hours later I have a question. So if that's you too, just feel free to send me an email as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I definitely appreciate your time and for you sharing all of this information with us. It was super helpful. And even though I've been working with you and your team for years, I still learned something new today. So thank you so much for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I hope you enjoy your evening, and hopefully some of my audience will be in touch with you and getting their privacy policy set up.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.